Truth is stranger than fiction. Although Lord Byron coined that iconic phrase, I first heard it from a slightly less cultured source.
He's asking you if you'll swear to tell the truth.
Truth is stranger than fiction, Judgy Wudgy.
Regardless, perhaps the strangest thing about truth is its peculiar ability to bend through the eyes of the beholder. And there's just something so mesmerizing about this Canadian-built, plastic-bodied, gull-wing-doored sports car that invites us all to take a closer look. This is the strange but true story of the Bricklin SV-1. In April of 2019, I found myself on the floor of the New York International Auto Show, ignoring all the flashy reveals and celebrity appearances so I could interview the founder of an automaker that went bankrupt 40 years prior. By necessity, anyone who tries to start a car company must either be overconfident or crazy, or both. Yet, that is where Malcolm Bricklin found himself in the early 1970s. After building a personal fortune through a chain of hardware stores, he started a venture to rent motor scooters, which eventually turned into him co-founding Subaru of America in 1968. At under 1,000 pounds, the Subaru 360's diminutive size meant it didn't have to meet typical US safety regulations. Consumer Reports gave it a brutal review, calling it the most unsafe car on the market, nearly killing the fledgling company. But the experience taught Malcolm a valuable lesson. The government and the public were increasingly concerned about automotive safety. The proposal of stricter regulations had traditional automakers on the defensive.
I couldn't understand why they kept saying, if you do safety the way they're dictating, you're going to have ugly cars. Anyway, that doesn't make any sense. And for some reason, I got this bug. I'm going to build the safest car in the world, and it's going to be gorgeous.
With the audacious goal of proving the rest of the industry wrong, Bricklin started his own company in 1971 and scraped together the resources for a concept car built by the famous dune buggy builder, Bruce Myers. In 1972, Bricklin hired the design firm of Herb Grass to turn that concept into a reality that could be mass-produced. The process of drawing, designing, and modeling a new car typically took years. But the heroic efforts of Grass's team, combined with Malcolm's persistence, yielded a full-scale clay model in just 3 months. To save time and money, they used as many off-the-shelf components as possible. One day, when Malcolm brought a parade of investors through the studio, Grass hurriedly stole the taillights off his personal De Tomaso Pantera and slapped them on the Bricklin model just before they arrived. Everyone liked the design so much, they kept them. They called the new car SV-1 for Safety Vehicle 1. Despite the rush job, the final design turned out well, with an edgy, aggressive, futuristic profile. Compared to the lumpy, frumpy cars of the mid-70s, this styling looks a full decade ahead of its time. And as much as I love hood ornaments and chrome trim and vinyl roofs, I also really like the Bricklin's no-frills aggressiveness. My only complaint is that the rear bumper does look a little chunky. But we'll come back to that. The Bricklin company still needed a place to build the SV-1. After casting about, they landed on the unlikely location of St. John in New Brunswick, Canada. Malcolm had struck a chord with the leader of the province, Premier Richard Hatfield, who wanted to attract new businesses to relieve the area's high unemployment. The government agreed to loan Bricklin's company millions of dollars to open an assembly plant in St. John. Body panels would be manufactured in the nearby town of Minto. But the car still had a long way to go before it could be built. a large portion of the initial loans went not into manufacturing, but into finishing the car's engineering. A firm called AVC Engineering created the chassis for the SV-1, overseen by Herb Grass. True to its name, safety was integral to the design, including a built-in roll cage, reinforced side rails, impressive side impact door beams, and an enclosed fuel tank. All commonplace items today, but certainly not back then. Another critical element were massive front and rear bumpers, engineered to withstand a 10-mile-per-hour impact with no damage to the car, double the government's 5-mile-per-hour standard. Despite the company's limited resources, early crash tests were promising. Even the doors were touted as a safety feature, swinging up and out of the way to reduce the danger of getting out on a busy street. But that wasn't the only reason Malcolm insisted on having them.
And of course, as soon as you add gold-wing doors, it adds something very magic to any car. Take the ugliest car you ever saw and put some cool doors on it, and you got yourself a cool car. I mean, it's that simple.
Of course, a cool car needs cool colors, but building a paint facility is a massive investment, and Malcolm also wanted a surface that could resist scratches and dents, which led to a radical idea.
And I met with some people from Roman Haas, and they made plastic for bathrooms, sheets of plastic to put on the wall instead of tiles. And that's solid acrylic, that's solid paint. So I said to them, well, how do you do? What do? You vacuum form it. And then you, for what we need, reinforce it with fiberglass.
With plastic panels reinforced by fiberglass, the body couldn't rust. And since they were solid color the whole way through, minor scratches could just be sanded out. No repainting needed.
And they had 5 colors, that's why I have the colors I got. That's what they gave me, period. And I hated the vomit, I called it that vomitish, not the green, but there was an off-color, greenish, vomity looking thing.
The color he's referring to is called safety suntan. And although it's an odd choice for a car, it wouldn't look out of place in a 1970s bathroom. This car's safety red looks more like orange, but the actual safety orange cars are a much lighter shade. The use of third-party components continued under the car's skin as well. Brakes and suspension were largely sourced from the AMC Hornet. The motor would be a 220 horsepower AMC 360 cubic inch V8. Or at least, that was the plan.
So our people made a deal with them, and we went off and engineered it into our car and did all the safety things necessary. And about 3 months before we're ready to start taking shipments for the delivery, we already had the grand opening, we had 40,000 back orders, we're ready to go. I get notified, American Motors will not ship. Will not ship. I just spent $4 million building prototypes and doing the engineering for that engine. Now I wanted to buy 1,000 a month.
According to Malcolm, American Motors suddenly gave him the cold shoulder and refused to deliver the engines he'd already signed a contract for. According to a friend of mine familiar with AMC, Bricklin had been publicly bad-mouthing his supplier to the automotive press, which probably didn't help the situation. Finally, Bricklin got a hold of Bill Luneburg, American Motors' gruff president with a penchant for colorful language.
I called the secretary and I said, this is a life and death situation from my part. I need to talk to Mr. Luneburg. I don't want to make threats, but it would really be smarter to meet me now than have to deal with the press and the lawyers later. Message back, all right, you be here tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We come into his office, he has his vice presidents. I go through the story. We had your word, we did the engineering, they're expecting it a certain date. He said, well, let me tell you a story. I have been here a long time trying to sell cars. It's been hard. I can sell every single car I can build right now. That was a time when for some reason cars were walking out the door faster than you can build them. He said, after all these years, every time I sell you an engine, I lose a car sale. If you think I'm going to sell you engines so that I can't sell my cars. You're out of your mind. I said, well, let me tell you my story, because I'm not going to be out of my mind. I'm going to be out of my business, and I'm going to lose a lot of money. So what you're doing is pushing me out that window. And if I have to do that, I'm grabbing your tie because I'm landing on your stomach when we land. Here's what I'm doing. You don't give me what I want. I go out the door, I get on a plane, and I go to Washington. And I don't leave Washington until they know you're in a conspiracy with the other big three, putting me out of business. And here's my contract, and here's what they did. It's not the way I want to do business, but it is the way I'm going to save my ass if you don't give me what I want.
Let's stop for a moment of context. In the mid-1970s, GM, Ford, Chrysler, and to a lesser extent AMC, still ruled the automotive landscape in the US. Sentiment toward the American automakers was somewhat negative, as many people felt the companies had too much political power and were stiffing consumers with dangerous, unreliable, inefficient vehicles. Some more aggressive critics even advocated breaking up the car companies under antitrust laws. So, Malcolm's scheme of exposing a monopolistic conspiracy does sound a little wild, but it was by no means an empty threat.
And then he started in, who the hell do you think you are? I mean, you little, and on and on and on. And I said, I don't blame you one bit. What are you going to give me? He said, I'm going to give you 700 cars. And after 700 cars, go f*** yourself.
And so for 1974, Bricklin managed to build 772 SV-1s, each with AMC's 360 V8. Most had 3-speed automatic transmissions, although an estimated 155 had 4-speed manuals. The interior used some outsourced components as well. However, this is the only car I've ever seen with a rolling numbers digital clock. It's a super cool touch that I spent far too much time filming, waiting for the perfect shot. Conspicuously absent are an ashtray and a cigarette lighter. Remember, this was the 1970s. But having given it up himself, Malcolm thought smoking was dangerous, especially while driving. According to dealers, that didn't stop SV-1 owners from adding their own aftermarket ashtrays and smoking more than just cigarettes in their cars. Stepping over the wide door sills takes some finesse, and the cabin doesn't offer a great deal of room. But it's enough for these owners to take regular road trips. I didn't love the pseudo-suede seats, but they do grip your clothes and keep you from sliding around, which was also marketed as a safety feature. And marketing is where Malcolm Bricklin truly excelled. As the St. John factory slowly began turning out cars, excitement reached a fever pitch. Pre-orders for the SV-1 were rolling in, and his visionary idea of a safe, good-looking car was coming true. Of course, innovation rarely goes smoothly. Despite high hopes for a low sticker price, as costs ballooned, the company had to keep raising the MSRP from $4,000 to almost $7,500. The acrylic body panels became a quality nightmare, with up to 60% of the early material being unusable on the cars. And if not properly cared for, it could warp and crack. Meanwhile, the electro-hydraulic gull-wing doors presented another drawback, which Malcolm discovered personally.
One day I go out, it's raining. I go out to get in the car. I push the button. 6 seconds for that door to open. You know what 6 seconds is in the rain? 6 seconds to close the door, because if you go too fast with the hydraulic, you'll cut your hands off if you had your hand in the thing. That's 12 seconds in the rain. Oh my God, this is impossible. I would never do that twice. I wouldn't do it once if my name wasn't on the back of the car. Oh my God, what am I gonna do?
Not to mention, the system could break, leaving owners stuck lifting the heavy doors by hand. All of these problems were troublesome for a vehicle costing almost as much as a Lincoln Continental. Unfortunately, the company had to spend a boatload of money retooling for the 1975 models, which now used a less potent Ford Windsor V8. At 351 cubic inches, it made 175 horsepower and came with a 3-speed automatic only. Despite the loss of power, the engine in this car runs like a dream. It's hard to believe that underneath this stylish body are suspension parts from the humble AMC Hornet. This is the kind of car that just begs you to drive faster. You see a twist in the road up ahead, but you don't want to slow down because it's just so much fun to push the limits in a curve. And it's all the more impressive when you think about the Bricklin's age, because it's not like there were a lot of American cars you could do this in back in 1975. A great deal of the credit should go to this car's owner, who's worked tirelessly on every detail of this SV-1. It probably runs and drives better now than it did brand new. But even back in the day, a comparison test in Car and Driver magazine proved the Bricklin could almost keep pace with a similarly equipped Corvette. Not bad for a company's first car. I have to admit, there are faster cars, there are better handling cars, there are more collectible cars, and yes, there are even safer cars than the Bricklin. But driving the SV-1 surprised me. I didn't expect an emissions-era sports car with an automatic transmission to be this fun. This Bricklin is a genuine alternative to mainstream performance cars from the mid-70s. The Bricklin's agile, predictable handling could even be considered a safety feature, if it helps you avoid accidents before they happen. Provided, of course, you could afford an SV-1. By 1975, the price had risen to an excruciating $9,980, $3,000 over a Corvette, and well into Cadillac territory. Costs were out of control. Part of the problem came from enormous worker turnover. At the time, the Canadian welfare system allowed employees to quit after 10 weeks and collect unemployment benefits for over 42 weeks. Continuously training new workers took time and money. The company had succeeded in cleaning up most of its quality problems, and a compressed air replacement for the hydraulic door lifters was in the works. But the Bricklin Corporation still struggled to turn a profit. It needed more loans to stay afloat. The car and its charismatic creator had raised enough enthusiasm to help re-elect Premier Richard Hatfield. But soon, people began to notice just how much money the government had loaned out to the project. As political pressure began to build, Hatfield sought to distance himself from Bricklin.
One day, the Premier comes walking in the door, "Malcolm, I got to see you alone." Now, understand, we had gotten close. He said, "I'm closing it down." Now, they have 25 million invested, which is a lot of money back then. They know we have back orders up the kazoo. He's getting all the publicity. He just won an election with that in 3 months beforehand. This has got to be a joke. He said, "It's not a joke." He said, "Let me tell you why." He said, "I've given it a lot of thought, you can imagine." He said, "We won the election, and it was a great landslide. And every day of my life since, when I want to go talk to the press about anything, they have two questions. How's Malcolm and how's the car? They don't want to hear anything else. And it's never going to ever stop. I figured I stop and get rid of this thing. I wait another year, I call another election, and then I own it, not you." I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yeah." And we went bankrupt.
And with that, the Bricklin SV-1 was no more. In late 1975, the company went into receivership. A handful of 76 models were assembled from the remaining parts, making total estimated production just under 3,000 cars. In a bitter twist of fate, Even head designer Herb Grass had his company cars repossessed by the bank.
I lost more money doing the SV-1 than everything I ever lost in my entire life, but got me more credit and made my life 10,000 times easier because of it. And if it didn't fail, I wouldn't have had all that. Don't ask me how come that happens that way, but I'm known for that car. I mean, Subaru, all that, it's interesting, but the car was what people remember.
Even he admits he was too young and too inexperienced to start his own car company. But that didn't keep Malcolm Bricklin out of the industry forever. He imported the infamous Yugo to the United States in the 1980s and tried to import affordable Chinese cars during the 2000s. Now he's once again going to put his own name on a vehicle with plans for a radically styled electric three-wheeler. As for the people of New Brunswick, Canada, the Bricklin legacy remains mixed. The car has made its way onto postage stamps, coins, and even on stage with a full-blown musical. For many, it seems the controversy has given way to pride. It's easy to mock Malcolm Bricklin or any of these other people who started a car company and failed, but the reality is that the auto industry is a really harsh business. So to all those armchair CEOs out there, I ask, how many cars have your last name on them? Some dismiss Malcolm Bricklin as an automotive huckster who sold St. John a false dream on wheels. Others see him as a visionary, simply unlucky and ahead of his time. Perhaps I'm just one of the many stooges he's dazzled over the years with his big ideas and bigger personality, but the truth is, he wasn't any less authentic to me than all of those glad-handing PR people or hobnobbing automotive journalists I met that week at the New York Auto Show. So, I'll let you be the judge. After all, truth is stranger than fiction. Judgy Wudgy.
Your honor, not my honor.
Why? Don't you like him?
And if you want to drive a real-life Bricklin SV-1, check out DriveShare by Haggerty. They're a car-sharing platform that offers all kinds of classic, antique, and exotic vehicles. Whether it's for a big event or just a weekend getaway, you can make some memories with a special ride. And as someone who loves old cars, I think it's a great way for people who maybe don't have the space or the budget to own a classic to still enjoy driving one. And if you do own a special car, you can earn some extra cash by renting it out through DriveShare. Everything is safe and fully insured. Be sure to check out the link in the description for more information, and a big thanks to DriveShare for sponsoring this video. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to look at the rest of our channel, featuring stories of incredible cars and the fascinating people behind them. Thanks for watching.